Hey everyone, welcome to the video. This one I'm going over my first look lineup for week 17 of the NFL season on Draftkings, and that was really sad to say out loud because this is our last week of regular season football. Obviously the playoffs are awesome to watch, but just from a fantasy perspective, nothing really beats these Sunday main slates with 11 to 15 games. You know, it's fun chaos. You got all the players going at once, touchdowns everywhere. You're sitting back watching Red Zone. I am looking forward to the playoffs, but it's going to be sad to see the season go so fast. But just a quick thank you to all the subscribers here that have been watching the videos, or if you're new, like maybe you just play season long and you're checking out DFS for the first time this season, hello, welcome. Thanks for checking the videos out. But if you've been around the whole season, I want to thank you guys for all the views, the subscribers, just leaving likes, leaving comments, and then an extra thank you to the people that support me on Patreon that helps me do these videos every single day, every single week. So again, thank you guys very much. We got over 3K subscribers this year, so that was pretty awesome. Hopefully we can keep that growing into next year. I'm going to be around for the playoffs as well, but again, just for the regular season. I don't know if the playoff videos will see a dip or not. Maybe we'll see an increase. I don't know. But anyway, the purpose of this video is not for me to give you guys a lineup and just run with it. This is just a first look lineup where I'm just pretty much putting pieces in place. The main point of this video is just for me to go over my first initial reactions on this slate. Did I already do a little pre-check before this video on the prices and stuff? Yes, but I really didn't go too in depth in it with myself. I'm going to go over that in the video with you. So you'll get my first thoughts on this slate. Guys that are undervalued, guys that are overvalued, guys that are in good spots. You know, things like that, and we'll throw it all into a lineup. And I'm probably not going to like the end result of this lineup, but this is just the first look, and the point of this video is not to build a lineup. But anyway, before we continue, if you guys could leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. Really helps me out, really appreciate it. You can also follow me on Twitter at ChrisPennell16, and if you're interested in the spreadsheets about every single week for the NFL season, I'm going to do this for the playoffs as well. Links in the description below for my Patreon and my Discord chat as well. You can bug me as much as you want in there. Also do NBA content every single night, and then I will do NASCAR and MLB when that time comes. Alright, so anyway, let's get into this video. I'm just going to talk really quickly about a recap of last week. So if you don't want to listen to a recap, you can probably skip a couple minutes. But if not, you can listen for a little bit. So, a pretty good week. I hope you guys had a good week as well. I feel like that was one of my best weeks of the season. I love that Cincinnati stack with Andy Dalton and Tyler Boyd. It was a cheap stack, and obviously that went nuts. That game was insane. I don't know if you guys watched that, but they got the onside kick, they got the Hail Mary, they got the 2-point conversion, and that was awesome. But for my quarterback, just for my main lineup, I ended up going with Lamar Jackson, which that was looking really, really awful to start, but I ended up finishing very well thanks to a 61-yard touchdown for the half, and had the 100-yard bonus at the end of the game, so that was nice. He had 33 points. My running backs were DeAndre Washington, Dion Lewis, which I know Dion Lewis was in any of my videos, but that's because Derrick Henry got ruled out on late Saturday night, Sunday morning, so obviously couldn't do anything about that. So I ended up playing Dion Lewis. He got 9 points, wasn't too bad. Then I played Melvin Gordon. He sucked, but he got touchdown lucky, and I don't care how I get the points, luck or not, I will take them, so that was nice. He got about 22 points. I played Tyler Boyd, who he smashed. Couldn't pay for Michael Thomas, so I ended up paying down for Julio Jones. That was kind of a wash. They both pretty much did the same value-wise. Michael Thomas had 34, Julio Jones had 29, but Julio Jones was like $1,300 cheaper, so that was fine. And then for my last wide receiver spot, I went with Keenan Allen, and he was really disappointing. I wish I didn't use him, but it was a good spot. He was chalky. As for the tight end position, I went with Austin Hooper. He did fine. I think he had 15 points, if I remember correctly. It was either 11 or 15. I can't remember exactly. And then for my defense, I went Denver, which they were kind of disappointing as well. And then, so yeah, that was, Joe Mixon. I said Joe Mixon was my lock of the week, but I don't know if you guys saw the tweet. He ended up having a stomach bug. Maybe he was out too late at the club in Miami, got a stomach bug. So I actually got off of Joe Mixon because I was like, well, there's really no reason for me to take a risk because there were so many good mid-range running backs this week. I was like, well, I'm not going to play the guy with a stomach bug. I don't know how many carries he's going to get because they said his workload was in question. So I pulled him off my roster, saved some salary, and spent up a wide receiver. Ended up working out pretty well. I think I got 181 points. Although it was a really high-scoring week, so 181 points wasn't that impressive. But in single entries, it was fine. And then I had a comment. I don't know. Funny story. I had a comment on my video, like after the Cincinnati-Miami game, and they told me due to my video about my weather report for the video, all I said in that video was that there was a chance of rain and winds. So I preferred the running game when I was talking about Joe Mixon, and he said he told me I got off all of my Ryan Fitzpatrick, Devontae Parker stacks because of my weather report. And I was like, first of all, I never said to not play the passing game. I loved Tyler Boyd and I loved Andy Dalton in that game. So I don't know why you'd think I wouldn't like Ryan Fitzpatrick or Devontae Parker. And then I made that video when I said that on like late Friday night, Saturday morning. Obviously the weather changes. The weather ended up like at the time I made that video, I think it was like a 50% chance of rain in that game, and then like there's like 15-mile-per-hour winds, and then by the time the slate started, I think it was like a 10% chance of rain. There's like 10 miles per hour wind, so you gotta read the weather reports. So anyway, if you're watching this, just make sure you read the weather reports. The weather changes, and I make those videos a lot earlier than before the game starts. But yeah, I think that's about it for the recap. I hope you guys had a good week. I think a lot of the plays did pretty well. Yeah, I think that's all I can remember. So anyway, let's get into the first look. So at quarterback, Lamar Jackson, I assume Baltimore's going to be resting starters. And that's really another thing we got to talk about this week is that starters are going to be rested in certain games. And as of right now, I believe the Ravens are the ones that are going to rest starters, and then Buffalo can rest their starters as well because their seeds are locked. Then there's one other one that could change. So the Kansas City Chiefs and the Chargers game, if the Chiefs win, I believe the Texans can rest their starters. And the Chiefs game's at 1 o'clock and the Texans game's at 4 o'clock. So they should be able to know if they can rest starters or not. So again, that's something else you should keep your eye on because that's stuff we have to deal with on week 17. Teams can rest their starters, and actually Draftkings did price up some of the bench players so we can't get like absolutely free guys. So I will say that, but again, that's just a situation to keep your eye on. Buffalo and Baltimore more than likely going to rest their starters. I just don't see a reason why Baltimore wouldn't rest their starters. And then the Texans could as well. So Lamar Jackson, not going to be my radar. It's a tough matchup anyway, so I probably wouldn't play him if he was starting, but I don't assume he's going to be starting. Patrick Mahomes versus the Chargers, I don't love that matchup. Drew Brees versus Carolina, I prefer the run game there. Rodgers, it's a good matchup versus Detroit, but I just think there's better options for cheaper. So Ryan Tannehill, he could potentially be going up against a partial backup defense from the Houston Texans, and their starting defense isn't any good. So I think Ryan Tannehill could have a pretty good game versus Houston. He more recently just had a 25-point game versus them where he was 22 for 36, 2 touchdowns, 279 yards. So I think Ryan Tannehill would definitely be in play. Now I do think there's some better options that are a little bit cheaper, and maybe if they Texans do rest their starters, maybe this game gets a little bit out of hand, and then maybe the Titans pull their starters at some point if they have a big enough lead. Again, this could be a weird situation. But Ryan Tannehill, he's definitely in a good spot. Texans are one of the worst teams in the league when it comes to the quarterback position. This game also has at the moment, it has, if I can find it, a 49-point over-under, tight spread. That's assuming the Texans starters play. So either way, I like Ryan Tannehill. He should be a pretty good option this week, but not my favorite play in the world, but he's been very good. Deshaun Watson, there's a chance he doesn't start in this game, so I really don't want to talk about him too much. Jameis Winston, he had one of the worst games I've ever seen in my life on that Saturday game. It was horrendous to watch. He threw a pick six on the second play of the game, and then on the second drive of the game, he almost threw another pick six, but ended up getting called back. But he had 4 turnovers. It was absolutely ugly. And he still threw for over 300 yards. That's just what Jameis Winston does. He's going to turn the ball over a ton, and he's going to get over 300 yards and 18 fantasy points. Getting 18 fantasy points in that game was very impressive for how bad he looked, and he also didn't have Chris Godwin or Mike Evans, so he's throwing to guys like Justin Watson and Rashad Perriman. Hey, he gets the job done for fantasy purposes. This is a good matchup versus Atlanta, and this is my favorite game of the week as of right now. We have a 15.5-point over-under with a 2-point spread, so I do expect a lot of points to be scored in this game. 2 pretty bad defenses here, 2 decent offenses, so Jameis Winston definitely in play for me at 6,600. Do I wish he had his weapons? Yes, but I think he'd be a solid GPP play. Now, obviously, I'm going to prefer some other guys considering he's so expensive. He doesn't have his main options. Like Matt Ryan, I'm pretty sure I'd rather play Matt Ryan, to be honest. He's 6,500. I already said this game has the highest over-under in the slate right now. It's a tight spread. I expect a lot of points to be scored. And you cannot run on Tampa Bay. They have, the first DVOA run defense in the league right now, allowing, bottom 3 points allowed, or, allowing the third or second fewest points per game to running backs. So I expect Matt Ryan to be throwing the ball quite a bit. He just threw the ball 45 times versus Jacksonville, and if he throws the ball close to 50 times versus Tampa Bay, I don't see how he can't have a good game here. They are one of the worst defenses in the NFL when it comes to defending the pass. Now, they have gotten better. Earlier in the season, they were like 28th, sitting around there. Now they're up to like 19th, so they have gotten better, and they just did very well versus Deshaun Watson and company. They pretty much shut him down, but I just can't see Matt Ryan not having a good game here. He's got guys like Julio Jones to throw the ball to, and that obviously is going to just boost his floor and ceiling just right there alone. He's got Austin Hooper as well. Russell Gage isn't terrible either. Devontae Freeman out of the backfield. So Matt Ryan, I think, is a very solid play this week. Someone that's definitely going to be on my radar. We know the guy's got a high ceiling. I don't remember what he did versus Tampa Bay last time. Yeah, 9 points. Yeah, that's right. Because I like Matt Ryan a lot in this game, and he actually sucked in that game. He had 46 pass attempts, 23 yards, 271 yards, no touchdowns. I remember that game now. He was 53% owned that week too, and he just absolutely busted as chalk, but I don't really see that happening again. I think Matt Ryan's a pretty solid play on this slate as of right now. You could also look at Daniel Jones versus Philly. I don't hate it. He's coming off an absolute monster game where he had 5 touchdowns versus Washington. That game was a shootout, 41-35. Through the game-winning touchdown to Caden Smith, 42 pass attempts, 28 yards, and 28 completions. And Saquon Barkley had a huge game as well. I think he had 290 total yards. But Daniel Jones, 352 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, 132 quarterback rating, 38 fantasy points, absolute monster game. I think that was his best game of the year. The Tampa Bay game might have been a little bit better. Yeah, the Tampa Bay game he had 39 fantasy points because he had the 2 rushing touchdowns. But this is a good matchup versus Philly. They definitely beat Philly through the air. They have one of the tougher run defenses in the NFL. So I could see Daniel Jones having a pretty good game. He's got good players to throw to. He's got Sterling Shepard. He's got Saquon Barkley out of the backfield. We saw Saquon Barkley scoring that that's not streak route, seam route in that game as well. And he's got Golden Tate, Darius Slayton. So Daniel Jones, not a terrible play, but if you're going to give me Jared Goff here at 6,200, I would rather play Jared Goff, and I think he's going to be one of my favorite quarterbacks of the week. So Jared Goff has been much better recently. He had that terrible stretch of 6 points, 6 points, 6 points, then 27 points versus Arizona, and I was all in on Jared Goff week 13 versus Arizona, and he only ended up being like 6% owned that week, which I thought was a little peculiar. You know what I'm trying to say? I thought it was a little odd. 27 fantasy points. Then he had 18 points versus Seattle, 18 points versus Dallas, and 24 points versus San Francisco, which that game was a pretty surprise shootout. So versus Arizona, I don't see how you can have a good game here. This game features a 49 over-under. We know Jared Goff typically plays his best football at home. Arizona is the worst defense in the league at versus giving up fantasy points to the quarterback position, the most in the NFL. Jared Goff's got good weapons. He's got the new addition of Tyler Higbee, who's just been an absolute monster for him. He's got Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, Brandon Cooks. He's got Todd Gurley out of the backfield if he needs to. So Jared Goff, I don't see how he fails in this matchup. He's playing at home. It's also one of the late games at 425. I like getting exposure to the late games. Jared Goff, I think he's a pretty excellent option at 6,200 this week, and we're actually going to be plugging him in just for this lineup example because I think he can have a pretty solid game. And I also like Carson Wentz quite a bit at 6,100. This is a great matchup versus New York Giants, who are have one of the worst pass defenses in the NFL. Pretty solid versus the run, but they suck versus the pass. We just saw Dwayne Haskins and Case Keenum put up some solid games versus them, so I don't see any reason why Carson Wentz can't do the same. And Carson Wentz, he's actually been a lot better recently. So he had a really rough stretch of 9 points, 14 points, 15, 13, 12. Then versus Miami, 28, New York, 23, then Washington, 22, then Dallas, 21 today. Now he gets to face New York again. He just had 23 points versus them. I think Carson Wentz is a pretty solid play. 6,100 definitely should be able to put up a lot of points here. This game has a... I can find it. 45 point over under, Philly 7-point favorites. I think Carson Wentz is a pretty solid play. And again, he also plays at 425, so you get late game exposure. I think Carson Wentz and Jared Goff are very strong mid-range quarterbacks this week. Josh Allen, I would expect him to potentially sit here versus the Jets. I wouldn't have too much interest anyway, but definitely the candidate to be sitting this week. Tom Brady versus versus Miami. I really just don't like playing Tom Brady for DFS. Andy Dalton, he had a monster game versus Miami. He almost ruined the Cincinnati Bengals' chances for the first pick, but fortunately they lost the game for them, 35-38. But he had a monster game, 4 touchdowns, had that Hail Mary to Tyler Eifert, I believe he got it. 37 fantasy points. That's an absolute ceiling game. Decent matchup here versus Cleveland, so you could look his way in GPPs, but I really wouldn't see myself playing him in cash when I can get up to Carson Wentz for 200 more or Jared Goff for 300 more. I think those are better plays. And then just scrolling down, you could look at some of these backup quarterbacks that could potentially start, like RG3. He should get the start here. We know he has rushing upside. He's 5,100. I don't hate the idea of using RG3. I don't know the Ravens' plans exactly right now, but again, I assume he's going to get the start. Now, it's a tough matchup versus Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh's not going to rest their starters, so we're going to have the backup offense for the Ravens going up against the starting defense for the Steelers, and I really don't love that idea. I mean, you could target some of these guys for the Ravens because they're cheap, but I mean, RG3 might become in play. Maybe he racks up some rushing yards. I mean, that's really about it. I just can't see him doing too much damage. Then just scrolling down some more, AJ McCarron, maybe if Deshaun Watson sits, he could get some run. You know what I mean by run. He could get the starting gig. We'll have to see, though. That game really depends on if the Chiefs win that game, which you never know. The Chargers tend to hang around in certain games, so they could be a pest to the Chiefs. And then, really, that's about it. I couldn't really envision myself playing a guy like Matt Barkley or anything like that. So, yeah, it's going to be for the quarterbacks. I really like this mid-range here of guys like, Jared Goff, Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan, Daniel Jones, Jameis Winston. I think those are all pretty strong plays. Ryan Tannehill. So we'll get on to the running back position now at this point. So Christian McCaffrey, you can play him every single week. I never have a problem with that. I could never tell you not to play him. It's a tough matchup versus New Orleans, but last time he played New Orleans, he ended up with, 34 points. It doesn't matter. The guy's just an absolute elite receiver. I mean, look at these targets he's been getting. So week 11 versus Atlanta, 15, then 9, 12, 12, 10, 15 targets. He had 15 catches versus Indianapolis. He's game script proof. They got absolutely blown out, but he's not going to get taken out of the game. He's the workhorse. He's going to get you near 30 touches, either if it's through the air or through the ground. He's one of the safest plays every single week. And how many people in the NFL can score 35 fantasy points without scoring a touchdown? It's pretty much just Christian McCaffrey, or maybe if like Michael Thomas or Julio Jones have a big yardage game. But it's really pretty much just Christian McCaffrey. The guy's an absolute stud. Tough matchup versus New Orleans, but I really don't care about matchups when it comes to Christian McCaffrey. And also, DJ Moore left the game, I believe, with a concussion, if I remember correctly, so that just opened up more targets anyway. As you see, he had 15 targets in the last game, so Will Grier was definitely checking down to Christian McCaffrey, and I could see that happening again for sure. Saquon Barkley, he continued his hot stretch. He went 46 fantasy points, 22 carries, 189 yards, had that nice 67-yard touchdown, which was sweet. And then he had that receiving touchdown as well, 4 targets, 90 yards. And then, Saquon Barkley, been on absolute fire. It's a tough matchup versus Philly, so I don't really see myself targeting him too much here. But the guy's been on absolute fire, and he's still 8,700. So the guy's got upside, and he's one of the best running backs in the NFL, if not the best. Aaron Jones gets an elite matchup versus Detroit, but I don't typically like playing Aaron Jones, especially if he's above 8K, so I'm probably at the pass there. Derrick Henry is expected to be back this week, or next week, I should say, because it's still Sunday, but I assume they were just pretty much resting him for this game, because it did not matter if the Titans won that game versus the Saints or not, so probably just a rest game just to keep him healthy for this one. Zeke versus Washington, he's cheap. We just saw Saquon Barkley absolutely destroy Washington, but I don't hate Zeke. 8K, it's not the worst play in the world, but he's been a little disappointing this season. But he did have 7 targets in the last game, which was nice to see. But he sucked on the ground, 3.6 yards per carry, 13 carries, 47 yards. I wouldn't call him a core player or anything, but he's definitely in play at that price tag. But someone I do like a lot this week, and I feel like he's going to be a core play for me, it's Alvin Kamara. He comes in at 7,800. He finally broke out of his slump, and of course, no one played him. I think he was 3% owned in my GPP. That's how it goes sometimes. When he's chalk, he busts. When he's low owned, he goes off. Busted off that 40-yard touchdown. Ended up getting 2 touchdowns in this game. Touchdown regression finally caught up to him. 11 carries, 80 yards. And he also had 7 targets, 6 catches for 30 yards. They had a very good game versus a really tough run defense in Tennessee, who was 4th or 3rd, or really, I think they were 5th DVA versus the run. So going up against Carolina now, I play pretty much any running back that's alive versus Carolina. We saw Marlon Mack just get 95 yards and a touchdown versus them. We saw Chris Carson absolutely eat it versus Carolina last week. And I see no reason why Alvin Kamara, one of the best running backs in the NFL, below 8K wouldn't be a good play this week. He should be able to smash here. They are 10-point favorites. And he's also heavily involved in the passing game. He's going to get us 5+ targets every single week, so you have that nice floor built in. And if his touchdown streak continues, which I think it will versus Carolina, unless Latavius Murray trolls us, Alvin Kamara should be a smash play. Carolina is the worst rush defense in the NFL. They've given up 24 rushing touchdowns this season. Jacksonville is second with, I believe, 15 right now, because I think they gave up a couple touchdowns today. It's either 15 or 16. So Carolina's in a league of their own, giving up 24 or 25 rushing touchdowns this season. I would tell you the exact numbers, but my data thing has not updated yet. Usually updates on like Wednesday when the week's over officially. So they were coming into the week at 23, and I think Brian Hill and Devonta Freeman both got rushing touchdowns. I believe Jacksonville would be at 16 now, and Carolina gave up 2, I think, to Jordan Wilkins, Marlon Mack. So, but anyway, either way, they're getting destroyed on the ground. They're giving up easily over 100 yards rushing per game, the most touchdowns per game. I see no reason why Alvin Kamara, if he gets near 20 touches in this game, can't smash. So definitely like Alvin Kamara at 7,800. I like the receiving upside as well, so we're going to plug him in. I thought he'd be a little bit cheaper because I knew they were playing Carolina, but 7,800, I still like the price quite a bit, so we're going to be plugging him in. And after this, there's a lot of good options on the slate. You could go with Nick Chubb versus Cincinnati, one of the worst rush defenses in the NFL, getting absolutely hammered on the ground. The Browns are favorites in this game. I would expect him to win this game. Problem is Kareem Hunt does steal some touches and definitely has hurt his receiving upside as well. If you look at his recent targets, 3, 2, 1, 3, 1. So he's been kind of killed in the passing game, but we know the guy's got upside as well. We saw it versus Arizona, 17 carries, 127 yards, 1 touchdown. And the guy's one of the best pure running backs in the NFL. So, if you think Cleveland plays with the lead here and just wants to pound Chubb 20+ times, yeah, I think he's a pretty strong play at 7,500. I can't see him having having too much ownership on this slate. But if you're telling me if I could either play Kamara or Nick Chubb for similar price, I'm taking the receiving upside I have with Alvin Kamara because Nick Chubb really doesn't offer us any. So I will, and I trust the Saints offense more than I trust the Browns offense as well. Joe Mixon. So again, I said I got off him on Sunday morning because he was reported to have a stomach bug, and I don't know how hard it is to play football with a stomach bug. So I got off him, and he had a terrible day on the ground. 21 carries, 50 yards, 2.5 yards per carry. Pretty much didn't do anything, 9.3 fantasy points. Assuming he doesn't have a stomach bug heading into Sunday's game versus Cleveland, should be a pretty good play at 7,200. Cleveland has one of the worst rush defenses in the NFL. The Ravens ran all over them. Lamar Jackson got over 100 yards rushing. I see no reason why Joe Mixon can't do that again. Or replicate that, I should say. And last time we played Cleveland, Week 14, had his best game of the season. We had 30 fantasy points, 4 targets, 40 yards, 23 carries, 146 yards, got into the end zone. Joe Mixon, I think he's a very strong play on this slate. Wish he was a little bit cheaper because his price is coming up, but still think he's a pretty solid play, although he did not make this lineup video. Kenyon Drake's an absolute stud. Broke up that 80-yard touchdown, and past 2 games have been amazing for Kenyon Drake. I think he's going to be a pretty high draft pick next year in season-long leagues, but we'll see. Anyway, he's involved in the passing game if need be, but 137 yards last week versus Cleveland, 166 yards versus Seattle, 22 carries, 24 carries. He's flirting with 25+ touches the past 2 weeks, and the Rams are a pretty good run defense, but I don't hate him. But 7,100 is a tough price to pay for Kenyon Drake, I will admit that, but the upside has been there the past few weeks. Leonard Fournette, the Jacksonville Jaguars, I just don't really want to play anyone on Jacksonville. Their team is absolutely horrendous at this point, so probably going to be passing on Leonard Fournette. Marlon Mack, though, I think he's a pretty solid play at 6,900. Last time he played Jacksonville, he absolutely ate. He did get hurt in that game, so he could have even had a bigger game, but 14 carries, 109 yards, got into the end zone, 19.9 fantasy points. Had a good game versus Carolina last week, 16 carries, 95 yards, and a touchdown. 2 targets, actually, which was nice because he hasn't had a target in forever. So the 2 targets were nice, 18 fantasy points. I think he eats versus Jacksonville, even though he's on the road. I expect Indy to win this game. So do like Marlon Mack at 6,900. I think he's a pretty solid play, although he's not in this lineup video. Miles Sanders, he's been awesome. I really don't see myself playing him versus the Giants, but 38 points and 26 points the past 2 weeks. Think of that 21-point game versus Miami. The volume's been there. He's been pretty much getting 20+ targets, 20+ touches a game, and the targets have been nice too, 5, 5, 6, 6. So I think he's a pretty solid play. The price has come up, but I don't hate Miles Sanders. He's a pretty good player, so don't mind him. Todd Gurley versus Arizona, that could be a pretty good play. Arizona's got one of the worst defenses in the NFL. Although it really wouldn't make sense for me to want to play Todd Gurley if I'm playing Jared Goff in this lineup. Devonta Freeman, I don't really play running backs versus Tampa Bay. Ingram's going to miss this game for sure, so we could take a look at Gus Edwards or Justice Hill. We'll talk about them in a little bit. Josh Jacobs, he might play. Not sure yet. We'll have to monitor news on that. Austin Eckler. I prefer Melvin Gordon because he's a little bit cheaper, and I trust Melvin Gordon's touchdown upside more than I do Austin Eckler. But, if you think the Chargers are going to be losing this game by quite a bit versus the Kansas City Chiefs, Eckler would become a pretty good play. Philip Lindsay at 6,100 versus Oakland. I believe he had a pretty good game. Yeah, 22 fantasy points, had that 109 yards, 19 carries, got into the end zone, that 27-yard touchdown, 3 targets. I just don't really feel comfortable paying 6,100 for Philip Lindsay, so I'm probably going to have to pass there, but he's in consideration. I did like the game he had last week, but the price came up a little bit more than I would like. Melvin Gordon at 6K. So I played him, so I might be a little bit biased, and I might be a little bit happy with him right now. But I think it's 6K. I think he's still in play because I feel like this is still a little bit too cheap for Melvin Gordon. Now, trust me, he was horrendous on the ground. 9 carries, 15 yards, 1.7 yards per carry. But he did have 7 targets again. He had 7 targets the past 2 games, so I do like that he's being involved in the passing game. It helps boost his floor and his ceiling as well. And he did get into the end zone twice, so you don't have to worry about Austin Eckler scaling goal line touchdowns. That's going to be Melvin Gordon's job. And I love the matchup here versus Kansas City. They are 30th DVA versus the run. I believe they're top 3 in points allowed per game to the running back position, so I don't see why Melvin Gordon can't have another good game. The Chargers' path to winning this game is to have success on the ground because the Chiefs have one of the better pass defenses in the NFL, and Phillip Rivers kind of sucks. So, Melvin Gordon, if I'm the coach, I'm running the ball with Melvin Gordon, just hoping it works because I think that's their only path to victory here. So, Melvin Gordon at 6K. I'm going to plug him in. He's involved in the passing game. I do like that. And he should get you 15-plus touches at 6K. So, versus one of the worst rush defenses in the NFL. So, I do like Melvin Gordon here. We're going to plug him in. I know people might not agree with that, but he's got touchdown upside, which I do like. As for I shouldn't skip that quick. I guess we still have some more running backs to talk about. James White versus Miami. I don't love it. Just because New England's 16-point favorites, I wouldn't expect them to have to use James White too much. I prefer them in games that might be a little bit closer. I think Sony Michel might be an okay play, to be honest. Le'Veon Bell versus I don't play Le'Veon Bell. He's not very good. James Conner left that game. I don't know if there's an extra injury report. Nope, nothing came out yet, so we'll see. Maybe Benny Snell will become in play, something like that. That's pushing it a little bit. Latavius Murray. If I'm playing Kamara, I'm not playing Murray because that's just an absolutely awful correlation play. Jamal Williams, no thank you. Let's see. Washington. Even if Josh Jacobs is out, I can't really see myself paying $5,200 for DeAndre Washington. He did have a good game. He sucked in the first half, but he ended up getting that touchdown finish with, 17 or 19 fantasy points. So that was actually a pretty solid game. So he could be someone you look to if Josh Jacobs happens to be out. But the Raiders actually have a chance to make the playoffs. Everything that they needed to happen today, it happened. And next week, everything that they need to happen is definitely possible. So honestly, the hardest thing for the Raiders might be just beating Denver. So if Josh Jacobs has a chance to play, I think he's going to push himself to play because the guy seems like he's a baller. I mean, he seems like he wants to be on the field. So I can see Jacobs playing in that game, to be honest. Montgomery, he is terrible. Peterson versus Dallas, no thank you. Sony Michel, I think he's an all right play here because I like Sony Michel in games that I think the Patriots are going to be up big, and I definitely think that's going to be the case versus Miami. I think New England just shuts down the Miami offense. In the past 2 games for Sony Michel, 21 carries, 96 yards, 4.6 yards per carry on the ground. Not too bad. Did have 2 targets for 5 yards, 11 fantasy points. He did get a touchdown, then he got called back, and then for some reason, no, it's because he got a timeout. Then for some reason they brought in Rex Burkhead to score the touchdown, and I was very upset because I had an 8% owned Sony Michel on the Saturday slate. But just know that there's a potential for Bill Belichick to bring in Rex Burkhead just to troll everyone. But then he had 19 carries versus Cincinnati. I think Sony Michel, if he gets 20-plus touches versus Miami, they're one of the worst rush defenses in the NFL. I don't see why he can't have a good game here. They're allowing over 120 rushing yards per game. I actually like Sony Michel, and I actually forget who I put in the flex spot, so if we have enough salary for him, I don't hate the idea of using him. Not the highest upside play, but I do think there's touchdown upside for Sony Michel. Actually, I don't remember what he did in the last game versus Miami. Let's see. 13 points, 21 carries, 83 yards. He got a touchdown. It's not terrible. It's really not that bad. So we could look at Sonny Michel. Ronald Jones, not a terrible play. He actually had a pretty good game versus the Texans. Had 14 carries, 4 targets, 19 fantasy points. You could look his way. I think he's an okay option. Gus Edwards. So if Mark Ingram, not if, he's going to be out. So I guess the only question would be is, do they make Gus Edwards the bell cow running back, or do they split it up with Justice Hill, or do they just give Justice Hill main run? Because I don't know how serious this Mark Ingram injury is going to be, so maybe they want to keep Gus Edwards fresh. So I'm not totally sure on the situation as of right now, but he could potentially become a pretty solid play because the guy's a pretty good running back. I mean, last year he was pretty good, and he's been pretty solid this year in limited run. So wouldn't hate the idea of using Gus Edwards, but again, I don't know the situation yet. It's only Sunday night, so we have to keep our eyes out for that. That's pretty much going to be it for the running back position. I really can't see myself playing any of these guys. Actually, I'm actually going to pause this real quick. I need a drink. My voice is getting pretty rough. Alright, so let's talk about these receivers right now. I feel like this video has been very long, so I'll try to go a little bit quicker. But Michael Thomas versus Carolina. Obviously, he's a good play every single week. But 9,900, I think I'm going to pass there. He's probably going to score 30-plus points, but I don't think I can do it this week. But Julio Jones, he's at 8,500. I'd much rather play Julio Jones because you get, 1,400 savings, and he's got similar upside as well, and he's had a great past 2 weeks. So he had 15 targets versus Jacksonville, 20 targets versus San Francisco. Look, if you're going to get about 15 to 20 targets versus Tampa Bay, and your name's Julio Jones, one of the best receivers in the NFL, one of the best receivers of all time, you're probably going to smash here. He had 41 points versus San Francisco. He got 2 touchdowns, 166 yards versus Jacksonville, 29.6 fantasy points. Now going up against the team giving up the most points per game to the wide receiver position. I don't see why we can't like Julio Jones here. And again, I know that the Falcons failed versus Tampa Bay last time. Jones had 10 targets, 5 catches, 68 yards, 11 fantasy points. But I don't really care. I mean, it's a new day. I think Julio Jones and Matt Ryan are going to hook up here, and I think Julio Jones continues this hot streak. I mean, he's been getting plenty of targets here, and he's one of the best receivers in the game. So Julio Jones versus Tampa Bay, I think he can smash. So he'd probably be my favorite spend up at the wide receiver position as of right now. Devontae Adams versus Detroit. I don't see a reason why Devontae Adams can't have a good game here. We know Detroit has one of the worst defenses in the NFL versus the run and versus the pass. Darius Slay's nothing to be scared of at this point in the season. So I think Devontae Adams should have a pretty good game here. He's a safe play. His targets are there every single week. I feel like he's going to have a pretty good game here versus Minnesota. I went over him in my showdown video. So I'm assuming he's going to have a good game there. And he had 13 targets, 6 targets, 10, 12, 10, 11, 15. He's got Aaron Rodgers throwing on the ball. I don't see why Devontae Adams can have a good game here versus Detroit. Hopkins, potential to be sitting, so really don't want to talk about him too much. Tyreek Hill, I just really can't see myself playing Tyreek Hill. It could be a GPP play. I mean, I don't see anyone playing him, so you could look his way for GPPs, but I don't really see myself playing Tyreek Hill. Edelman versus Miami. I mean, he's a safe play, but he's done with injuries, so I really don't see myself playing 7,300 for Julian Edelman. And if the Patriots get a big lead here, which I think they could, I wouldn't see why they want to push Julian Edelman too much. Robinson versus Minnesota. I don't hate it, but I don't love it either. Parker versus New England. I just typically avoid wide receiver ones versus New England. And actually, if you look at the first game he had, it was that was when Miami was awful. Obviously, Ryan Fitzpatrick came in and pretty much turned the offense around, but still, he was held catches on 7 targets. But, Ryan Fitzpatrick turned him into a monster, so I could definitely see him having a solid game, especially if they just fall behind and it's a lot of garbage time yards. Definitely possible, but I really wouldn't see myself paying $7,100 for Devontae Parker versus, Stephon Gilmore. So A.J. Brown versus Houston. I could definitely see that being a pretty good play. A.J. Brown's been an absolute monster. 15 points, 28, 36, 7, 26. Lower floor, but the guy's been very good. Going up against the Houston defense, who has one of the worst defenses in the NFL. Just actually cooked them 2 weeks ago. We had 13 targets, 8 catches, 114 yards, 1 touchdown, 28 fantasy points. And if they happen to rest some key starters, I don't even want to know how bad that defense is going to be. So A.J. Brown, definitely on my radar. If you're playing Ryan Tannehill, it makes sense to stack them up together. Not sure I'd get there in cash games, but still think he's a solid play. But Robert Woods. So we have Jared Goff in our lineup. So we're probably going to want to get a pass catcher with Robert Woods. So, not with Jared Goff. So I think Robert Woods is our top option here at 7K. He's pretty much surpassed Cooper Kupp in terms of targets every single week. I think Cooper Kupp's a fine play, but I like what Robert Woods been doing recently. So if you look at the last game he played versus Arizona, he had 18 targets, 13 catches. I swear he had like 7 catches on the opening drive, 33 fantasy points, 172 yards, then 25 points on 9 targets, 5 points on 9 targets, but the targets were there. That's the most important thing. Then versus San Francisco, 11 targets, 8 catches, 117 yards, 23 fantasy points. Problem is he's really not scoring touchdowns, but he's been doing just fine without scoring touchdowns. Before the Arizona game, 9 targets, 15 points, 11 targets, 16 points. Those were some tougher matchups right there as well. So I think Robert Woods at 7K. Is he expensive? Yes, but I want correlation in my lineup, so we're going to plug him in as of right now. It's a great matchup versus Arizona. One of the worst pass defenses in the NFL, one of the worst defenses versus the wide receiver position, so don't see why Robert Woods can't have a good game here. Then scrolling down a little bit, Cooper Kupp, if you want to save 200, I think that's fine. He's on a touchdown streak as of right now, but the targets really have not been there for Cooper Kupp. Tyler Boyd had an absolute monster game versus Miami. I was all about Tyler Boyd this week. I thought he was a little bit too cheap, and he smashed 15 targets, 9 catches, 128 yards, 2 touchdowns. He was awesome. Do I love him versus Cleveland? No, but I think he's a safe bet for around 15 fantasy points. I don't hate Tyler Boyd, but price came up a ton. Brashad Perriman, he's been awesome the past 2 games. He's the main wide receiver one here, and past 4 games he's been solid, to be honest. 13 points, 16 points. Then versus Detroit, had that breakout game where he had 3 touchdowns, 37 points. Then as being the lone wide receiver, no Mike Evans, no Chris Godwin, 12 targets last week, 7 catches, 102 yards, 20 fantasy points. I like Brashad Perriman. The problem is he's 6,700, but if you're playing Jameis Winston, it would probably make sense to play Brashad Perriman if you want to get his number 1 wide receiver. Don't hate the matchup versus Atlanta whatsoever. This should be a pretty high-scoring game. Brashad Perriman, I think, is a pretty solid play. Not going to make this lineup, but don't mind him. DJ Moore, he's in the concussion protocol, so I don't see a reason to play him anyway, because if he's playing, he's going to see Marshawn Lattimore, so I don't love the idea of playing him. Murray Cooper, I read a tweet where he actually got benched at one point in the last game, which blows my mind, but doesn't surprise me with the Cowboys. But he had 12 targets, but did absolutely nothing with them versus Philly. Now, he is playing at home, and he's much better at home, so definitely someone you could look at for GPPs, but Cooper's not typically someone I play. Diggs, not a lot of interest. Sutton, it's a good matchup versus Oakland, but I don't know. I just don't really want to play Sutton at 6,400. Go down a little bit. Let's see, Landry would be fine versus Cincinnati, but I just don't like the Browns offense too much. And I'm a Browns fan, so that's saying a lot right now. I don't really want to play anyone from the Browns. Odell's cheap at 5,700. I got to be honest. I was tempted to put him in this lineup, but it's just hard to trust. It's hard to trust. They get into the end zone the last game, though, so that was nice. So let's just scroll down some more. Some of the receivers I like down here. There's actually quite a few. But Justin Watson at 4,900. So I liked him a ton heading into the Saturday game. Just because there's no Mike Evans, there's no Chris Godwin. Obviously, there's going to be more targets for guys like Perriman and Justin Watson. Well, Watson had 10 targets. I will take 10 targets all day versus Atlanta. I will take that at 4,900. He had 5 catches. Did get into the end zone, 15 points, 1 touchdown. Now, he's not going to be a big play guy, but I think he's fine at 4,900. So I think we're going to plug him in just to get some exposure to this game. Is there big play upside here? Not really, but I got to say he could have had a 40-yard touchdown versus the Texans, but he stumbled and he was open though. But I think at 4,900, I think he's a safe play this week. I like the targets he had. Jameis Winston should be throwing the ball a ton here, so don't mind Justin Watson. We'll plug him in. One of my favorite plays in the world, not really, but I like the matchup and I like the Vegas total in this game. If he's going to get me close to 10 targets again, I will take it. Then Greg Ward, I like Greg Ward here. He comes in at 4,700, and the guy's just been really good as pretty much being the only option to throw the ball to. I know J.J. Arcega-Whiteside exists, but really that's pretty much at the wide receiver position. Had 9 targets versus the Giants, 9 targets versus Washington, then 5 targets last week versus Dallas, but still he had 11 fantasy points, 19 points, 7 points. Going up against one of the worst pass defenses in the NFL, the Giants are just absolutely horrendous. I think Greg Ward at 4,700 is not a bad option, so we're going to plug him in. I love this wide receiving group. Robert Woods I like, but Justin Watson, Greg Ward, not my favorites, but they're in good matchups. So we're gonna roll with them as of right now. And then there's another wide receiver I have some interest in. If the Texans happen to have to play their starters, I know Will Fuller is dealing with the injury, so you can look at Kenny Stills going up against Tennessee, who's got a really bad pass defense. They have 9 targets in that game versus Tampa Bay, 5 catches, 10 fantasy points. Not great, but you could look his way. He'll play a lot of snaps if Will Fuller's out again. See, Russell Gage at 4,400. That's actually not too bad of a play. Did have 6 targets the past 2 weeks. Doesn't do a lot with them, but 10 points, 8 points, not terrible. 4,400. Great matchup versus Tampa Bay. Last time he played Tampa Bay, he had 10 targets, 8 catches, 15 fantasy points, although I believe Austin Hooper was out in that game, so obviously he's not going to get 10 targets. But don't hate Russell Gage if he's going to make 5+ targets at 4,400. Maybe he falls into the end zone. So someone that could be on my radar. And also Brandon Cooks is cheap, and he did catch a touchdown last week. He did have 8 targets versus Dallas, 6 targets versus San Francisco, so the targets have seen an uptick. Can't really count on him, but he's got some upside at 4,400, so I don't hate that, but I don't want to play too many Rams in my lineup. So now let's just get on to the tight end position, and then we'll pretty much be done. So Travis Kelce, yeah, you can always play Travis Kelce, but I don't really see myself paying $7K for him. Mark Andrews, I would assume that the Ravens rest their starters. Zach Ertz, he destroyed the Giants last time out, and he's really just the only good receiving option besides Goddard on this team right now. And if you like Carson Wentz, you should probably like Zach Ertz. Now, his line versus Dallas was lackluster, but he also left that game at one point. So, but last time versus the Giants, he had 13 targets, 9 catches, 2 touchdowns, 30 fantasy points. Do I think he's going to get 30 fantasy points again? No, but I do think he's a safe bet to get close to 20 fantasy points. The targets are going to be there, so don't mind Zach Ertz at $6K. Price did come down a little bit. Austin Hooper, I think he's a fantastic option. He was having a pretty good game versus Jacksonville. 9 targets, 7 catches, 82 yards, 15 fantasy points. Not a bad day from Austin Hooper. Tampa Bay is one of the worst defenses in the NFL versus the tight end position, so definitely someone that could be on my radar as of right now. But if we have Jared Goff in our lineup, I want some correlation. Now, I already have Robert Woods, but I see no reason why we can't play Tyler Higbee as well. Gerald Everett was back last week, and it did not matter, so I like seeing that. And Higbee, he's been awesome. He's been awesome. Versus Arizona last time. 8 targets, 7 catches. There goes my phone. Had 26 fantasy points, 107 yards, got into the end zone. Then the next week, 11 targets, 116 yards. Versus Dallas, 14 targets, 12 catches, 111 yards. Versus San Francisco, 11 targets, 9 catches, 104 yards. I don't see how he doesn't do it again. 22 points, 26, 21, 26. A lot of points are going to be scored by the Rams here. Tyler Higbee, he's been great, so I don't see why we don't just keep rolling with it. 5,600 still seems like a fair price. So I mean, it feels weird paying 5,600 for Tyler Higbee, but I'll do it. I'm pairing him up with Jared Goff. I like the correlation in our lineup, so I like Jared Goff. I got Robert Woods, and I got Tyler Higbee, and I think that's a pretty solid little mini stack as of right now. So at this point, we only have 3,900 left, so that's not going to leave us a lot to work with. So let's just look at the defenses as of right now, and we'll see what flex fits at the end. But I always like to scroll down for my defenses to see, and then we'll scroll up. So Dolphins versus New England, hard pass. Chargers versus Kansas City, pass. Lions versus Green Bay, pass. Panthers, no. Versus Saints, no way. Bears versus Minnesota. I got to be honest, I was intrigued at first, but I really can't do it. Redskins versus Dallas. If they were at home, I'd have a little bit more interest, but on the road, Dallas tends to play better at home. Giants versus Philly, no thank you. I wouldn't play the Cardinals versus my main stack here. Raiders, no. The Jets, so Buffalo rest their starters. We could look at the Jets. They're 2,700, so that actually wouldn't be the worst play in the road if they're going up against a bunch of backups. And the Jets' defense hasn't been horrendous. 12 points, 5 points, 4 points, 2 points sucks, but then 18, 9, 16. Wouldn't be the worst play in the world at 2,700, especially if they're going up against backups. Texans, no thank you. Titans, if Texans rest their starters, you could get the Titans against a bunch of backups. I wouldn't hate the idea of doing that. Vikings versus Mitch Trubisky is always in play. Bengals, no. Steelers going up against more than likely backups versus Baltimore at 3K. They got one of the best defenses in the NFL. I wouldn't hate it, so we could plug them in at 3K. I wouldn't hate the idea of using that. That gives us 4,800 left in our lineup, so we could potentially go with a running back who I don't know who's 4,800. So we got Gus Edwards. So if he's going to be the bell cow running back, we could do it, but I don't have the correlation going up against my own defense, but I don't hate it. Maybe if we spend down for defense a little bit, we can get up to like Sony Michel or something like that. So let's see. So maybe if we assume that the Texans rest their starters, that gives us 5K left, and then we could play someone like, let's see, we could get Sonny Michel, who I think is in a good matchup, or maybe even Ronald Jones at 4,900. So you could look his way if you just want to get more exposure to this game. I wouldn't hate the idea of doing that. He actually had a pretty good game last time out, 14 carries, 77 yards. He got into the end zone, busted off that nice long run of 49 yards, had 4 targets, which I do like. I mean, he's going to get more targets just because of all the injuries on this team. And you get just exposure to one of the highest totals on the slate. Maybe he lucks into a touchdown. But you could also play Sonny Michel, who I think this is going to be a very positive game script for Sonny Michel. I don't think the Patriots are going to have to throw the ball quite a bit. I think they just rely on Sonny Michel grinding this game out. I think he gets 20-plus carries, and there's potential of him getting over 100 yards and a touchdown in this game. So I wouldn't hate the idea of using Sonny Michel. I actually think he's a decently solid play. Now, do I love this lineup? Not really. Now, we could actually go up to the Vikings defense if you want to just even this out versus Mr. Trubisky. They're going to be at home. I don't hate the idea of something like this. It's not the worst lineup in the world. Again, take this lineup with a grain of salt. I just went through some of my first reactions, then we plugged some guys in. Well, we got Jared Goff, we got Alvin Kamara, Melvin Gordon, Robert Woods, Justin Watson, Greg Ward, Tyler Higbee, Sonny Michel, Vikings defense. Not too bad, but again, this is not like a deep research video. This is more of a relaxing episode. We're just going through our first thoughts. I'll have my core plays video out next, and I'll do my lineup building video. Maybe we'll do some extra videos as well. But again, first look lineup of the regular season. I'll be doing it for the playoffs as well. But again, thank you guys for tuning in. Hope this video was helpful. If it was, remember to leave a like. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Really helps me out. Really appreciate it. I just looked at the time of this video. It's 46 minutes, so I apologize. So if you made it through, props to you. But remember to leave a like. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And I'll see you guys in the next video.